Welcome to the Authors Panel, the second plenary session of the BCLT Virtual Summer School in 2020. My name is Kyoko Yoshida. I am a fiction writer and translator from and into Japanese. And from Norwich, I am moderating the panel of 4 summer school workshop authors: Sanneke Van Hassel, Christina Hesselholdt, Mona Høvring, and Pascale Kramer. And Mona and Pascale are with their translators, Carrie Dixon and Adriana Hunter. This panel is made of 2 parts. The first part is pre-recorded session of the 4 panelists discussing their writing and the experience of being translated into different languages. This part lasts about 40 to 45 minutes. The second part is a live stream Q&A session. We hope to secure about 30 minutes because I'm sure the audience have lots of questions to ask. How you post your question during the live streaming, I will explain later before the Q&A session. So let me introduce the authors. They're all award-winning European female authors this year. First, Sanneke Van Hassel is the author of 3 collections of short stories. And in 2010, she organized a short story festival in Amsterdam called Hotel Van Hassel. Since then, she has been active in putting together programs focusing on short stories. Her stories have been anthologized in Penguin collection of Dutch short stories and Best European Fiction in 2012. And she has a chapbook of short stories forthcoming this year titled Shelter. And she's joining us from Rotterdam. Second, Christina Hesselholdt. She's joining us from Copenhagen. And she started as a poet and also the writer of experimental prose. And she has published 8 novels, 1 collection of short stories, and 3 volumes of linked stories. And I believe one of which is anthologized in the Best European Fiction of 2013, titled Camilla and the Horse. And she has 2 novels translated into English, Vivian, I have one here, and Companions with a similar blue cover. Third author is Mona Høvring, and she's joining us from Western Norway. Sorry, I mixed up. Her name is Mona Høvring, and she's in Holgenswund. Sorry about that. And that she made her debut as a poet first, and has since published 5 more collections of poetry and 4 novels. And in 2018, she published the novel Because Venus Crossed an Ultraviolet on the Day I Was Born, which was praised as a definite breakthrough for the author. And this book is forthcoming in English, 2021, next year, from Book Hug. And the translator, Carrie Dixon, is with us. Right now she's in Edinburgh, and she's one of the co-translators of this Because Venus Crossed an Ultraviolet on the Day I Was Born. Okay, and the 4th writer today is Pascale Kramer, and she's joining us from Paris. And her latest novel translated English is The Autopsy of a Father. Pascale is from Switzerland. She was born in Geneva, and after living in Lausanne and Zurich, practicing journalism and advertisement, she moved to Paris. She has multiple volumes translated into many languages, and she's also the organizer of the documentary film festival Enfants dans le monde, Childhood of the World, I believe that's what it means. And she's with the translator, Adriana Hunter. She's now in Tunbridge Wells, and she will be translating Pascale today. So those are the co-authors and 2 translators. So here, finally, the initial question. This year, we have 4 female fiction writers from different countries in Europe. The authors also belong to more or less same generation, about 10 years apart, I believe. And I'm interested if there were any synchronism in literary influences as you grew up in different languages in the same continent. Which authors did you read growing up before you knew you would want to become a writer yourself? Who and what have you read since you decided to write yourself? Were there any authors that gave you an impact on your view of literature, fiction writing, and gender? How have you been responding to them in your own work? Did you read translation from early on or later? Do you read in other languages other than your own writing language? So basically, I'm interested as, women writers from Europe of the similar generation, what sort of experience you shared, or perhaps specific, So let's start with Saneke.
Yeah, what may be interesting to tell is when I was younger, I was just a omnivorous reader, so I read everything, and that went on, I think, till end of university, and then I started working with a theater company, so I was used to theater text, and I also started writing more, and I took creative writing class, and there I found a short story, but I discovered a short story, and but then I read a lot of male authors, because I read Raymond Carver and the Hemingway stories, of course. So then in the form I was very much influenced by that, and then but then I missed the female experience, although that can be all encompassing everything. But so then I read also, for example, Colette, the French writer, or Marguerite Duras, or I read Virginia Woolf. But now I also know very good female short story writers. For example, Maeve Brennan, an Irish writer, or N.N. Wright, or from America, Lydia Davis, who's a very beautiful experimental short story writer, or Grace Paley from New York, more from the 70s, 80s. But it was interesting, in the form I was much influenced by male authors, I realized, because of this question you asked. Yeah. And I've read a lot of, I used to write also in original language, but since a couple of years I prefer reading in translation, because I discovered I miss less I miss maybe the music of the language a little bit, but I understand more what the author is trying to do, I think, in good translation. And there are a lot of good translations in Dutch. So, for example, I just read Jenny Oville, Weather, but I read it in Dutch, and it was very well translated, and I thought, yeah, I'm happy I read it in Dutch. And I think when I was younger, I always read in original language.
Okay, so next, Christina. Yeah.
Yes, as you mentioned, I started out writing poetry, and I began writing poetry when I was 13. When I was 20, I began writing prose and decided to try to become a prose writer. In my teens, I read, for instance, Aldous Huxley, Henry Miller, Anais Nin, and Lawrence Dorr. Of these four, Aldous Huxley and Lawrence Dorr have been the most important to me. Their novels are very rich. Not only is there the story, but also many reflections on literature and many quotations from books of other writers, many poets, for instance. Reading these books was like opening a gift box full of references to literature that I could go searching for. I also read Marguerite Duras in these years and was struck by the beauty of her writing and the intensity in the emotions of the characters. Most of her novels are short and dense, and reading her encouraged me to write short novels myself, I guess. And Duras also sent me to the library and to the bookshops looking for other short novels, which I've had a special love for ever since. I want to show you some of my favorites. Recently, I have discovered Annie Ernaux. This is a girl's story in Danish. I like Fleur Chegui very much, the Swiss writer who's writing in Italian. And also the Austrian writer Friedrich Mayröcker. But to summarize what I was reading in my teens, on the one hand, Huxley and his large compositions, and on the other hand, the short, dense novels. And it might show that I read within a wide range of literature when I was young, and I'm still doing that. I'm going to mention some writers who have had an impact on aspects of my writing. I mean, when I started to write prose. But first of all, I would like to say the writers I love have one thing in common. They all write in an intense manner. Intensity is part of their aesthetic. When it comes to composition, two Norwegian writers have been important to me. First, Paul Helge Haugen and his concept of the punctual novel. It inspired my own first novel. And Tor Ylven inspired another of my novels by the concept of the fragmented novel. I have translated both Paul Helge Haugen and Ylven into Danish. When it comes to fragmentation, or to put it another way, to create a whole out of fragments, Claude Simon has been important to me as well. My books, all in different manners, piece together parts to a whole. That's my way of creating coherence. I studied literature, and my thesis was on John Fowles. I wrote about his concept of the open-ended novel and his idea of the unexplained or the unsolved, the mystery, the riddle, as an enormously powerful thing. And that has meant something for my own writing. And I think that's one reason why my attention was drawn to the photographer Vivian Maier, and I decided to write a novel about her, the unexplained parts of her life, the question, why did she choose not to show her great work to the world? And I did that in the novel, Vivian. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so third up is Mona.
Ja. Hallo, alle sammen. Jeg snakker på norsk, og Kari oversetter for meg. Det er jeg veldig glad for.
Hello, my name is Mona, and Kari, I am going to speak in Norwegian, and Kari is going to translate for me, which I'm very grateful for.
Spørsmålet er jo veldig stort og veldig spennende. Jeg er født i 1962. Jeg begynte å lese når jeg var 5 år, og jeg kommer fra en familie som ikke hadde så mange bøker, bortsett fra Bibelen, sånn at jeg gikk på biblioteket og leste whatever.
This is a very big and interesting and exciting question. I was born in 1962 and I started to read when I was about 5 years old. But I come from a family that didn't have many books, so apart from the Bible, and so it was a question of going to the library.
Yeah. Og på biblioteket så var det stabler med bøker som jeg fikk lov å ta med meg 10-12 bøker. Da var det alt fra pikehistorier, Nancy Drew, historien om Helen Keller, og så Heidi av Johanna Spyri. Sånne bøker som er helt åpenbare, og Victor Hugo, og jeg gråt øynene ut av disse sørgelige historier. Jeg leste også Dickens da jeg var liten. Ja.
Okay, and in the library they had I could borrow piles of about 10 to 12 books, and there were often stories for girls, Nancy Drew, Heidi by Johanna Spyri, one I can't remember, Victor Hugo, sorry, I'm saying it in Norwegian, Victor Hugo, and I cried at all these sad stories.
Ja, og jeg ga ut min første bok, da var jeg ganske voksen, det var i 1998. Den var veldig inspirert av et gjendikterverk av en mann, en kriger og poet som het Arkilokos. Så det var min første sparringpartner av en kollega da, som levde før Kristus. Det var min første diktsamling i 98.
And so I published my first book in 1998 when I was, well grown, an adult, and it was a adaptation. This is a word, this is me speaking as a translator, it's a very difficult word, it's a repoeticization, it would be a direct translation. So it's an adaptation of Arkilokos. Arkilokos?
Yeah.
And it was the first time that I worked with and fought with a colleague, as it was, even if he was born long before me.
Ja, og av forfattere som er kvinner, jeg vegrer meg veldig mot å si kvinnelig forfatter på norsk. Jeg vet ikke hvordan det er på engelsk, men på norsk høres det veldig, en begynner å stigmatisere og dele opp med en gang en sier kvinnelig forfatter. Så jeg foretrekker å si en forfatter, og så finner en ut etter hvert om det er en mann eller kvinne. Men selvfølgelig så er det mange kvinner som skriver, og har skrevet, som står mitt hjerte veldig nær, og det skal jeg si når Kari er over.
Okay. As a writer, I dislike using the word or the description female writer, because I think it already starts to separate and stigmatize the role of the writer. I prefer to say writer and let people discover as things move along, whether it's a man or a woman. But obviously there are a lot of women who have been very important to me in my writing.
Og blant annet Flosjogi, som Christina også nevner, har vært veldig, veldig viktig for meg. Den sveitsiske forfatteren Flosjogi setter jeg veldig høyt. Jeg har også lest nesten alle bøkene til den brasiliansk-ukrainske forfatteren Clarice Lispector. For meg er det Nobelprisnivå. Hun er dessverre død, men bøkene hennes lever Jeg har også en forfatter som jeg holder på å lese nøye nå, som fra USA, eller var fra USA, hun også død, Lucia Berlin. Kan jeg ta litt, Kari?
Ja, hva sa du? Kan du ta litt, skal jeg ta det? Ja.
Kan jeg ta noe til? Ja. Og av svenske så det jo selvfølgelig Selma Lagerlöf, og vi har jo, altså Christina jo en som leses i Norden, virkelig, og Helle, en dansk forfatter, samtidig svært interessant forfatterskap, og det liksom har ingen, ja, jeg liker liksom å tenke at vi som her i dag her fordi det en eller annen form for kvalitet i arbeidene våre, og selvfølgelig ikke fordi vi kvinner. Men det fint at det bare kvinner i panelet, synes jeg. Og så har jeg også hatt et veldig, veldig nært forhold til Camilla Collett, en norsk forfatter som var født 1813, som en av de viktigste norske forfatterne, tenker jeg, og jeg har også skrevet en bok som nær opp til hennes liv og virke.
Okay, Mona, yeah. I'm going to summarize.
Yes, I know.
If you see I've missed anything, please correct me. So obviously of the women who've been important to my writing, there's, as Christina mentioned, there's Fleur Jaggi from Switzerland, yeah, who's played a great role. Clarice Lispector, the Brazilian-Lithuanian writer, who I believe her writing was of Nobel Prize quality, but unfortunately she's dead now. There's also Lucia Berlin from the United States, who sadly is also dead. And from Sweden, Selma Lagerlöf has been very important to me. Danish writers, Christina is well read throughout the whole of the Nordic countries, and Helle, who's also a contemporary writer. And I believe, and I'm very, that we are here because of the quality of our work, not because we're women, but of course it's very nice that we are all women. Oh yeah, Camilla Collett, very important because that's what we're translating. Camilla Collett was a Norwegian writer who was born in 1813, and she is very close to my heart, and I've spent a lot of time reading her work, and I've written a book about her.
Yeah, addition, yeah, that was good. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I used too much time, but yeah, it's so much to share.
Yeah. So now, Pascale.
Yes. Alors, je vais parler en français. Ravie d'être parmi vous, mesdames. Donc, par rapport à ce que j'ai lu, moi, j'étais une enfant dyslexique, très dyslexique, et donc j'ai eu beaucoup de mal à commencer à plonger dans la lecture. Donc, j'ai commencé très tard à lire de la littérature, à lire des livres. J'ai commencé très tard.
I'm going to be speaking in French, and I'm very happy to be amongst you here. As for my reading as a child, I was dyslexic. I was very dyslexic, so I actually started reading very late.
Et j'ai commencé avec des livres plutôt très difficiles. Je crois que qui était très difficile pour mon âge. Je devais avoir 17 ans. J'ai commencé avec Germinal de Zola. Et ensuite, j'ai lu mais c'était vraiment des défis que je me lançais. J'ai lu La recherche du temps perdu.
So I started with books that were actually very difficult for my age. I must have been about 17 at the time. I was reading things like Zola's Germinal, and I was really throwing down challenges for myself. So that included In Search of Lost Time.
Et ensuite, quand j'ai commencé à écrire jeune, je me suis intéressée à la littérature contemporaine française, et j'ai été très marquée par Hervé Guibert, qui est un auteur mort du sida à 28 ans et qui a fait beaucoup d'autofiction, pas que, mais beaucoup d'autofiction, et notamment sur cette expérience de l'approche de la mort.
And then I turned to more contemporary fiction, and I was very struck by the work of Hervé Guibert, who was a young writer who suffered from AIDS, and he died young, and he was very much a voice for that experience, a lot of autofiction, a voice for his experience as an AIDS sufferer.
Et pour moi, Hervé Guibert, il a vraiment placé l'ambition sur ce qu'on ne peut dire. Hervé Guibert disait de son propre travail qu'il faisait une œuvre barbare et délicate, et barbare dans le sens qu'il disait la vérité, qu'il disait les choses telles qu'elles sont, et elles étaient très cruelles pour lui vu qu'il était en train de mourir, mais il le faisait avec une délicatesse d'âme, pas forcément de style, mais d'âme. Et c'est vraiment deux choses qui sont restées très importantes pour moi comme écrivain.
And Guibert really set the tone for me as to what you could achieve with writing. He said that his writing style was barbaric and sensitive. Barbaric in the sense that he was tackling really difficult issues that were really cruel, particularly for him personally. But at the same time, his writing was sensitive in the terms of the soul, rather than the actual writing itself, but sensitive in the meaning of delicate and thoughtful.
Ensuite, il y a eu des auteurs qui ont été très importants pour moi au niveau de l'écriture. Il y a eu Pascale Kramer. Je pourrais citer aussi Colette. Je crois qu'on se retrouve toutes sur Colette. Et puis Marguerite Duras qui m'impressionnait beaucoup pour ses qualités littéraires. Même si en relisant Duras, je me suis rendu compte qu'en fait, c'est un amour qui m'est passé un peu.
Then I'd like to talk about writers who impressed me for their writing. I was particularly struck by Pascale Kramer and Colette. I think we can all agree on Colette. And also Marguerite Duras, although now looking back, I feel as if that's a phase that I'm over.
Et plus tard, quand donc j'avais déjà écrit plusieurs livres, j'ai découvert les auteurs américains et là je me suis sentie complètement en terrain connu. J'avais l'impression qu'ils faisaient ce que j'essayais de faire, c'est-à-dire en tout cas ce que je lisais, une écriture du quotidien, de milieux ordinaires, normaux, de gens normaux. Et je me suis vraiment extrêmement retrouvée dans ces auteurs-là.
Next, I turned my attention to American writers, and I really felt I was in familiar territory because at least the writers that I was reading were doing very much what I was trying to do. They were writing about everyday life and ordinary people, and I really recognized myself in what they were doing.
Et celui qui est pour moi le livre qui reste pour moi indépassable dans ce que j'aimerais savoir faire, c'est la Pastorale américaine de Philip Roth, qui embrasse toute une époque, tout un monde dans toute sa complexité, qui peut se mettre à la place aussi bien d'hommes que de femmes et qui a vraiment réussi à donner le sens de tout un monde, de toute une époque. Et voilà, pour moi, c'est vraiment l'auteur parfait.
And the book that for me just absolutely can't be bettered is Philip Roth's American Pastoral, which manages to embrace an entire community, a whole little world, and to enter into that community, whether it be men or women, and to recreate it. And that would that's the best you could possibly get. That's what I'm aiming for.
Et je ferai la même réponse sur littérature. La question du genre, en fait, me paraît pas appropriée en littérature. Je crois que je lis les auteurs sans me poser la question de ce qu'ils sont, hommes ou femmes. Et je ne sais pas si, sans me connaître, des lecteurs pourraient savoir si ce que j'écris est masculin ou féminin. Pour moi, la question ne doit pas se poser.
As for gender, I never really think about whether an author is a man or a woman, and equally, I don't know whether people reading my work would necessarily know whether it was written by a man or a woman. It's just a question I don't feel I need to ask.
Okay, thank you. You know, this question of gender, you know, sometimes it baffles me too. I once, you know, I attended the panel a couple of times, like a, you know, feminist response to this or female authors panel, etc. And I agree, you know, that the when you write or when you read, you don't think about it too much, but at the same time, sometimes you are posed this question. So, you know, it was my turn to pose that question too. But it was brilliant. Also, you know, all sorts of writers, both in original language and translation, and we clearly saw some, you know, correspondences and that some, you know, overall influences. Colette totally rules, you know. Great, and they kind of see like we share some time and geography, but at the same time there are little, you know, different forms, short forms or more experimental or more naturalist, etc. So we see all sorts of things spreading out. That's wonderful. My second question. Okay, so now tell us about your experience of being translated, and was it collaborative or did it happen like magic? You know, you were sleeping and you wake up and there was your translation, or was it? How was this revisiting of the text you wrote before as a translation? Has it changed the way you write, or did you see the readership in different light? Or, you know, tell us about your experience of being translated. Shall we start with Sanneke?
I will talk about my latest experience. That was with Danny Ginnen. He's an Irish translator who lives in the Netherlands, and we really collaborated. He, of course, made the translation, but then we sat together and we went through every word, almost. But that I really enjoyed that, and I hope he enjoyed it too. I had the impression he enjoyed it too. And I think at 2 or 3 points I thought, oh yeah, I made a mistake. It could have been better, and I improved it in the English version. So that was a strange experience for you. See. What I really appreciated is when a translator also has a feeling for the rhythm and manages to how do you say that, that also in the new language, English in this case, he kept a very intense rhythm, and but it was really a collaboration, and which you can only do, of course, when you know the language a little bit, which is the case with English. And I was also once translated in Korean. Then it's out of your hands more. So I really like it when it's French or German or English. I can understand it a little bit, and that's then I like it that I can say something. And my experience is the translators like it too.
So translator like to work with the author.
Yeah, and ask questions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and that they say, do you think this is better or that is better? So that they can propose something.
Mm-hmm. Did you get some, you know, the surprising questions?
But I don't remember that now.
Okay, later. Okay, Christina.
Yes, I began to get translated 5 years ago when I got a new agent. Before that, not much had happened. I've been writing for 29 years now, or publishing books. And then eventually something started to happen when I got an English, or she's French agent, Laurence Leloup from Rogers, Coleridge and White. And I have been working closely with some of my translators, especially with Paul Garrett. We almost spent a week together when he was translating Vivian, and I enjoyed it a lot. But I don't think it has not changed my way of writing to become translated.
No.
And you translate yourself as well?
I did it when I was younger, and I've only translated 5 books from Norwegian, and it's ages ago. I started to do it because I loved these books so much, so I wanted to get as close to them as I could. And translating books are the closest you can get.
Right. And how was that experience?
It was a good experience, and I worked closely with Paul Helge when I translated 3 of his books. I was not very good at Norwegian when I set out to do it, but I improved in the process. So it took me a very long time to translate the first book. It's called Anne, this punctual novel I mentioned before. And unfortunately, Thor Ulven was dead when I translated one of his novels. Or he has only written 2. Yeah, one of them. It was very, very difficult, but the publishing house where it came out in Denmark was being very helpful. Secured the text from mistakes.
Right. So it's great that you could work with the author that you admired and learn from the process.
Yes, that was really fantastic.
Okay. What about you, Mona?
Ja, det var en blanding av like magic og ting, like magic. Og det skjønner alle, Kari, kanskje uten at du må oversette.
It was a mixture of like magic and others, but yeah.
Jeg har alltid lest oversatt litteratur i mange år uten å tenke særlig over det. For eksempel Clarice Lispector, som jeg nevnte, hun skrev jo på portugisisk, og henne har jeg foretrukket å lese på svensk, selv om hun er oversatt til norsk. Og en del franske forfattere har jeg jo også lest på norsk og likt, men jeg har ingen mulighet til å sjekke om oversettelsen er god. Det har jeg heller ikke på mine egne bøker. Bortsett fra dansk og svensk.
So I've always read a lot of translated literature without really thinking about the process. For example, Clarice Lispector, who wrote in Portuguese, and I actually chose to read her in Swedish, not Norwegian. And I've read Spanish authors in Norwegian without being able to comment or think about the translation itself. And equally, when I've been translated, my work has been translated, I don't have access to it apart from Danish and Swedish.
So,
I did that.
Ja, og jeg har oversatt til 7 språk nå, så det er helt rart. Og jeg kan jo egentlig bare lene meg tilbake og få disse fantastiske oversetterne til arbeidet for meg, og det krever en viss tillit, selvfølgelig. Men jeg tror jeg har vært heldig, selv om jeg ikke kan tysk, så har jeg en oversetter som heter Edvard Rolfsagen i Tyskland. Han har 2 bøker for meg, og vi har hatt en veldig fin dialog gjennom oversettelsesperioden. Men jeg har vært nødt til å ha tillit. Og jeg er veldig enig med Sanneke i det med musikalitet, at det er jo det at en må håpe og tro at oversetteren har en nensomhet, en rytmisk sans, en evne til å gå inn i en signatur, i en stemme og transformere den til et helt annet språk, og det er virkelig Jeg skjønner at det må være utrolig vanskelig, men samtidig så det jo, ja, for meg har det vært veldig som en skole på en måte, å være ute og snakke om bøkene mine også i andre land. Og jeg har en som heter Jonas Rasmussen, som oversetter fordi Venus passerte en alpefiol den dagen jeg ble født nå, så den kommer snart på svensk. Så ja, jeg har veldig god erfaring med å arbeide med dette, fordi jeg har hatt så dyktige oversettere som har virket veldig selvdrevne og profesjonelle. Ja.
Okay. So I've actually been translated into 7 languages, and I've really had to trust my translators and to trust that they're sensitive to the language and my work. And I believe that the translators that I've been very fortunate with, and they've been very good. For example, in German, I've worked with someone called Eva Drolshaugen, and we've had a very good dialogue. And most of the translators that I've worked with, I feel have been successful, but I can't check on some of them. I agree with Sanneke that musicality is very important, and that I trust that the translator is able to capture the voice, any signature, rhythm and detail, and has a sensitivity to the music of the language. It's been a real schooling for me, or a learning curve for me, to talk about my books in other countries. And at the moment, Jonas Rasmussen is translating because Venus passed an Alp violet on the day that I was born, into Swedish at the moment. But yes, it's a great translation is very important, and it's a great job. Yeah.
Og på dansk så det en oversetter som heter Ditte Holmbro, som har bodd en del i Norge, og som jeg kunne følge veldig tett. Og jeg tenker også at når jeg leste oversettelsen på dansk, for eksempel, så var jeg veldig glad for at hun på en måte hadde catchet temperamentet i teksten, eller temperaturen i teksten, sånn at jeg gjenkjente temperaturen.
So in Danish, I've worked with a translator called Ditte Holmbro, who's lived in Norway for quite some time as well, and we've had a lot of conversations. And when I read the Danish, which I can, I was so pleased to see that she'd managed to catch the temperament or the temperature of the text.
Great, thank you. Pascale.
So I will try to say it in English, and if I can no more, I will ask Adriana. So my very first book translated was into Italian. It was Manu, my first novel published in France, and it was I knew about a translation, but it was a very difficult period of time of my life. And so suddenly I heard that I received a call from this Anna Pensa, and she said, I am your translator in Italy, in Napoli. The book is done. Would you come to Italy? And I was like, yes. So it was a first very nice experience. We are very good friends now. She had never the opportunity to translate another one in Italian. Now, recently somebody else translated one of my books in Italian. But yeah, it was the first experience. I cannot speak Italian, so I have no idea how good it is, but I'm sure it is good. And then I have a lot of books translated into German by the same person, Andrea Spingler. And the very first book she translated from me is The Living. And so I had not heard from her for the whole period of time where she was working on it. And then we had, that's English translate. And then we had a very big book tour in Germany. So she heard me talking about the book, and she said she has learned, she would have translated it very differently, or maybe not very differently, but differently, if she would have heard me talking about my writing and my book before. So then we became also very good friends, and so she sent me questions all the time. When she gets a problem, she sent me emails, and I try to translate, to answer very soon. I know some German, but it's really difficult for me to appreciate. But I know she's a very famous translator, and I'm sure she does a very, very good job for me. And I know also where she has trouble to translate me. For instance, my books are very visual, and she needs to see exactly what I see. So now I'm used to do drawing for her. You know, I draw the house. I said, here's the kitchen, and here's a garden, and here's so she can. So now I do it before she asks. I send le plan de l'appartement. How do you say a plan? The map of the
map or
yeah.
a plan. A map
yeah.
or a plan, yes.
Yeah, and my first translation into English was through the German version, because it's a translator, Times in Black. She's from UK, and she lived at this time in Bern, and she had discovered my book into German, and she really felt in love. It was a living, and so she did a sample of translation, and then she went through all publisher in America, and she finally found a publisher. And then I have 2 other books published. So she translated the second one, and then another translator translated the third one. And again, I speak, as you can tell, not perfectly English, and it's very difficult for me to read in English. So again, I really trust my translator. I think it's really, we have to trust, there is no other way. And I'm sure it's something different. It's another book somehow. But yeah, and it's such a wonderful opportunity to travel, to discover other authors also. So yeah, thank you to the translator, I would say.
It is that the writing itself is like you kind of let yourself go to strangers as readers, but it feels like it's so more so when it comes to like working with translator, you got to trust that person. You kind of that you are letting your body go. Yeah. That the translators, that's the sense I get. It's also interesting that you talk about rhythm. Sanneke and Mona talked about rhythm and sound, and also Pascale talked about the visual. That would have been my third question if we had the time to ask: are you a visual writer? You're a writer of the sound. What comes before you start translating this initial whatever, in your imagination into your own language? But we have to stop here. But our conversation will continue at live stream, and hopefully we'll have lots of questions. Welcome to the Authors Panel, the second plenary session of the BCLT Virtual Summer School in 2020. This is the second part of the Authors Panel live Q&A session for half an hour. My name is Kyoko Yoshida, and we're here with the authors Sanneke Van Hassel, Christina Hesselholdt, Mona Høvring, Pascale Kramer, and with translators Carrie Dixon and Adriana Hunter. So please, the audience members, please turn off your cameras and microphones. And the authors and translators, 2 translators, please turn on their microphones and camera at this moment. Because we only have half an hour to ask questions, we'll take questions by chat function of the Zoom. When you type your questions, please type to everyone, not to specific members of the audience. Okay, and Anna Good at BCLT will sort the questions, and I will reiterate the question, and I will ask one author, because we have only half an hour. And if that author could answer, that's fine, or if we could pass to another author. So let me start. While waiting for questions from the audience members, let me start with a question. From the previous session, I got the feeling that a lot of you get inspirations from other sources than literary text. And I'm wondering, what kind of things inspire you? Is it visual inspiration? Do you get ideas from traveling, music, etc.? Let me start with that. So, Mona, would you like to?
When I'm in the flow, på alerten, as it's called in Norwegian, then almost anything can get me some inspiration. So it's when I'm on, then anything. So, but when I'm off, then nothing. so it's almost like machinery. When it started, then a small sentence I can listen on the train or something. I listen to conversations. So I'm very curious when people are talking, when I'm on public transport and so on. So then I got a lot to think about, and I have some small paper. I'm making notes on napkins and everything, and a cup, dust, anything when I'm on.
I think, that we'll come back to this question of like, where do you get ideas or inspirations, and, what do you do when you actually, don't hear anything? I think we'll come back to that. But meanwhile, we're getting some questions from the audience. So here's a question. I'd be really interested to hear the panel's thoughts on translation and representation. Do you, for example, think your works would be translated differently by women than men? If so, how so? What about Sanneke?
Well, I've been translated both by women and by men, and I can tell there was no difference regarding my work, maybe for somebody else. But I write short stories, and sometimes I write from the perspective from a man. And sometimes I've written a story from the perspective of an older man, but he felt very close to me. So for me, that's the freedom of writing, and maybe also the freedom of translating, that you try to imagine other people's lives and thoughts, and you also connect them with yours. So for me, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Other people who would say like you've experienced some difference, or not just genders but different translators. Yes, Pascale.
Okay. Yeah, well, my experience is not about men or women, but it's really every translator has another way to translate. And it was very interesting this last days with a group of translators, how everyone has another way to see, to understand, to find solutions. So it's very amazing to believe that if you the same book would be translated by 5 different persons, there would be 5 different books, and that's scary and fantastic.
That's great. Here's another question. Do you struggle with word choice the same as we, the translators, do? So what about Christina?
Yes, I do. I struggle. My aim is to be as precise as possible. So I'm always trying to find the right word and the right image. That's my main concern all the time.
How was it looking at translators struggling to find right words during the workshops? And did you feel that they were experiencing something similar, or was there a difference?
I simply, I've felt so much at home the last days with the translators because it's my one of the things in the world I love the most. To dive into a sentence and stay there for a long time until you feel that you have reached perfection. I mean, perfection is probably not the right word, but stay in the sentence until you feel now it's simply right. Yeah, so I've had really, really good company the last days. I've even longed to become a translator as well. Again, I did a little translations when I was young.
Has the fact that your work has appeared in English translation had any impact on translation into other languages? Is translation into German also important in this respect? Okay, what about Sanneke?
I think because I've written short stories and they're translated now and then, but I think this question is better for somebody with a novel who's been translated in like 10 languages or so. I don't know if Christina or Mona or Pascale has that experience.
I'm sure the English translation is very important too, because it can be written by all around the world, and so it can help to get other translation. I don't know if it was a question, but.
Well, Pascale, I believe you were translated into multiple languages. Do you get like a different, do they circulate differently? Does English translation make more widen the audience, or do you get different responses?
It's difficult to say. I just know that, so about the German translation, I know that my first book translated into English was because of the German translation. So it's sure it helps to travel. Regarding my English translation, it brings me, of course, an audience in America. Both three books were translated into America, and it brought me not a big audience, but some audience.
Anybody who got translated into non-Western languages?
Yeah, I was translating Korean, Croatian, Serbian, which is then slightly different, Bosnian. A lot in Eastern Europe, where I don't know, there was a lot of attention for short stories. But that's with German or French or English, I can always understand a little bit, even with Spanish or Italian, I could understand a little bit how it was translated. With English, the best. But that was so strange with the language when you really don't know what they've done. Then you have really to let, I don't know if this is proper English, but to let it go. I found that very difficult. You think, where's the story?
Right.
What happened to it? Yeah.
So I suppose it's not just whether English is how do you say that, the hegemonic or not, but it's also like whether you know some of the language or not. If you cannot even read the alphabet or letters, it's really different experience for authors, I suppose. So here comes another question. Whether I'm trying to write or translate, I often struggle with the idea of permission, as if I'm waiting for some authority to grant permission to write or translate. Did any of you feel a similar obstacle? And if so, what made you feel bold enough to begin writing? Ooh, this is a good question. I would like to hear some answers to that. Mona, any
I think Kari has to help me a little bit about it, but it's about how to be that bold to start writing. Is it like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
be that stupid or that like this?
Men altså at du har en slags følelse for tillatelse,
Yeah.
at du blir tillatt, og ja, hvordan er... Ja.
Well, I didn't ask up. I asked inside, and it was a kind of a strange thing that came to me. I felt an urge to do something about the language, especially written, because I'm not feeling very secure about talking. So even if I talk a lot, so the permission came via that urge to have a language, to say something more than all these casualties and blah de blah things. So I wanted to try to do something about my life, hopefully that was interesting enough for other people to read and think about. So for me it was a kind of feeling of emptiness, not doing it. So I wanted to explore life more than only get up, eat, drink, and so on. So it sounds maybe a little bit strange, but it was to get meaning in life for me, actually, to find a way of feeling a kind of strong meaning. That's why I started to write, not out of boldness, I think, but out of desperation, Karin?
Desperation.
Yeah. I was very confused at the time when I started writing, and I feel it has, in a way, not saved my life, but it has helped me a lot in my life, and the same is reading, of course. But to write, then I have to push myself to some limits in another way than when I read. So yeah, I could say a lot, but the other ones for sure has something to say as well.
In my last two novels, I faced what you could call ethical problems, because I was writing about people who had lived or who were still alive. My novel Vivian is about the American street photographer Vivian Maier, and I had to try to solve the problem that I was actually using her name. And in the novel that came after, Years for Lovers, I'm writing about a murder case in Virginia in the 80s. I was writing about the two murderers, Elizabeth Hansom and Jens Søring. And I had to find a way to, in the novel, to discuss the ethical problems about it. Yeah, so I mean, this is also a part of writing. You use other people's life sometimes, and sometimes you use your own. And I don't know if you have to be bold, but you have to face the problems and try to solve it. Yeah, by reflecting on it, I think.
Can you suggest some of the solution that you came up with when you were working on Vivian? I was going to ask you about that, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. I chose to have a narrator up front in the novel, and to let him reflect on his project. And he ended up saying, when I look at Vivian Mayer's photos, I can see that she stepped very close to people and she took pictures of them, if they wanted or not. Yeah, I'm doing the same, writing about Vivian. So well, yes.
That's great. So this parallel between your act of writing and Vivian's photography, there's a parallel. And you also use this first person narration as a kind of setup to explore.
Yes, that's right. I mean, it's a novel of voices, and the narrator's a voice as well, who can discuss problems. So that's the way I solved it.
Okay, let's go to another question. This is from something that was mentioned in a pre-recorded session. How do you feel about the rhythm of the language in the translations of your work? Do you think this is possible to translate at all? So the translators and the writers might have different opinions about this, but Pascale, do you have any opinions about that?
Well, I know the
Rhythm
rhythm is very important in my writing. Yeah, it's something very important, but I know it cannot be the same rhythm in other languages. For instance, in German, it's very difficult because they have the verb at the end, and so the balance of the sentence is completely different. So I know my translator work on the rhythms in German, for instance, but of course it's different. And I know in English it's more similar than into French, so we can have the same kind of sentences. So but yeah, of course it is important, but yesterday we saw that sometimes you have to split a sentence in two parts because you cannot have it in the other language. So yeah, it has to have a rhythm, but I think that's something that belongs to the translator. He has his art, and I think that's part of his contribution to the work.
What about Sanneke? Do you have any take on this?
Yes, I think the rhythm is very important, but there's something a little bit strange, and that is the story that is being translated now for this week. There the rhythm, yeah, there is a rhythm, but it's not so strong as in other stories of me. So yeah, from the translations in English, I always worked with the translators on the rhythm, and that went very well, I think. And the music is, yeah, because it's a short story, you really work on every phrase and every word and choose words for the rhythm. So it's very important. So if I would have the feeling the rhythm was not good in another language, maybe it can be a different rhythm, but it has to have its own music, this specific story. So I hope then they would find something else that could replace it. But until now, I was very lucky with it. Yeah.
Coming back to the initial question that I brought up in the beginning of the session, audience member would like to hear about whether authors are visual or oral.
For sure, I would say visual, because sound can be very, very noisy, and I can't have sound when I am writing. Many colleagues has a lot of sound and music on and so on. I have to have it very, very quiet. Yeah.
And Mona, how do you do it with dialogue?
With dialogue?
Yeah, because I think that's very oral.
Yeah, that's sound, but then it's more small notes. It's not when I'm in it. I'm just putting on some words and some of the dialogue. But when I go home and work on my own, actually opening the manuscript, then it has to be very quiet.
Yeah.
So afterwards, it has to be quiet when I'm in get in the zone in a way.
Yeah. When you're on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Other visual people?
Well, I am visual, but also the most the best source of inspiration is life and experience of people. I don't know if I can say this in English, but I'm a social traveler. I go from so I have friends and experiences in all kind of social groups, very high society to very poor, and that's where I don't go there on purpose to write or to find ideas, but that's my way to life, and this way to life bring me to have to want to tell stories and write stories, because there are so many human experiences you can make, and that's always it always comes from something about our humanity, human being, that make me very curious, and then I have to grab, I don't know how to say, je dois creuser, so I have to go there. So that it comes really from my experience of different, from people. I love people, all kind of.
Creuser is to dig down into, to explore.
Yeah. Adriana?
Sorry, I just was explaining when Pascale used the French word creuser, when she comes across an idea that inspires her, she has to creuser, she has to dig down into it and explore it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about the oral, the sound-oriented authors? Christiana, Sanneke, how do you describe yourself?
Sound? Did you say sound? Sorry.
Yeah. Are you a sound writer or more a visual writer?
I'm more visual, but I've begun to think that I've neglected sounds all my life. So in my latest novel, I'm describing a lot of sounds. Yeah. I don't listen to music anymore. I did when I wrote my first book, my first novels. I remember listening to Purple Rain 1,000 times, writing my first novel. Yeah, but I don't do it anymore. I appreciate silence very much nowadays.
This is fascinating to me, because you often hear translators like to hear music, that when you translate. And I'm sure it doesn't apply to all the translators. I don't listen to music when I translate, but it's really interesting that you have done that. Yeah.
Can I ask Sanneke a question, please? It's
Yeah.
something very specific. If I'm not, sorry, I didn't mean to change the subject. But in Denmark, we don't get much Dutch literature translated, unfortunately. And there's one book I keep returning to. It's by Henk van Borten. Do you know it, Sanneke?
Yeah, but I haven't read it. It's quite famous, but it's not extremely well known.
Okay, A World of Glass.
Yeah, I haven't read it.
Okay.
Now I will.
I strongly recommend it. I keep returning to it. It's a great book.
Nice. Yeah.
But we need more Dutch literature and translation in Denmark. We have a case Notabum, for instance, but not many, and that's really a pity. So,
yeah, it could be. I think it's not so far away from each other. It's as a culture, and it's very strange.
Yeah, we have to work for it. It would be great to read you in Danish, for instance, but I'll have to read you in English.
I'd like to hear from Sanneke as well. Do you describe yourself like a sound writer? visual writer.
Very visual because it always starts with a place, could be a bus stop or a mountain, or well, it's always first the image, then the people come in. But then on the other hand, if it comes to the people, if it comes to the characters, I hear them talking. So I was a bit unwilling to choose because I have it both very strong. And also often the locations are real, but then I imagine people. But when they start talking, I know they say things that I've heard before from real people. So this strange combination of what you experience in life and you hear, and I like it very much what Pascale just said about I recognize that going to being with lots of many people, and also because since I'm a mother, I also don't listen to music anymore during writing because there's always noise in the house, so I'm happy if everybody's gone and I can write. But I'm also used to listening on the school square, or yeah, if I'm in the street with the dog, to what everybody is saying, or in the train. But then to start something, I need like a theater scenery, almost like a location where people come in and things start happening. So I need both. I'm not going to choose.
Very last question. How possessive are you of your work? This is rather complicated question to ask in a short, sentence, but because I see Pascale right now. Pascale, are you possessive? Are you possessive?
Sorry, I was talking to somebody else on the side. Yes, I am, but I cannot. Sorry, I was distracted. It's very bizarre to speak English with my friends here. Yes, I am very possessive with my work, definitely. But it's a very unusual question, and I would have to think about.
Right. I think when a translator asks if you're possessive about your work, is that are you possessive after you're done with it? That's my feeling. I suppose all of you are possessive when you're writing. What about afterwards?
Yeah, then the writing has to live its life. So yeah, so then we, like kids, we have to let them go, I guess.
Yeah, they have to do their own life. Oh, that's a good example. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, all the questions from the audience. We couldn't address all the questions. Thank you, all the authors. I hope the conversation will go on in your workshop and other opportunities. Thank you very much. And this is the end of the authors panel Q&A session.